Trotsky being assassinated on Stalin's orders in Mexico in 1940. In the meanwhile, Trotsky was involved with the sort of world of literary modernism. He, with André Breton, helped write a revolutionary manifesto about the arts. He was quite closely associated with the group around Partisan Review in New York, of the New York intellectuals, so-called Dwight MacDonald being one, Max Shachtman, trying to think of some others, Clement Greenberg. George Orwell considered himself to be, in a small way, a sympathizer with Trotsky. C.L.R. James, Victor Serge. So the word represents a sort of allegiance to a now buried and lost tradition of independent Marxist revolutionary thought and action, identified with a rather charismatic and rather, flawed heroic figure. Sorry, if that answer sounds cryptic, I could just suggest that you had a look at Isaac Deutsch's 3-volume biography of Trotsky. It's called The Prophet. Very beautifully written account of his life and opinions.
San Diego, you're on the air with Christopher Hitchens.
Yeah, fun to talk with you. Would you comment on our American hubris in willingness to accept our loss of industrial economic competitiveness with more actively government-involved economies such as Japan and China? Also, tell about your writings for Free Inquiry, and have you read much of Isaac Asimov's non-fiction science writings?
In reverse order, I once went to hear Isaac Asimov give a lunchtime talk at Columbia University in New York. It was in the early 1980s. It was an attack on the revival of the creationist movement. A very brilliant and witty talk. I'm not a science fiction reader myself. I don't even like the masters like Philip K. Dick and others. I find them very hard to read. I've never had taken much stock in science fiction, but I've read some other polemics by Asimov, as well as seeing him give that very spirited address. And, well, my work for Free Inquiry, which is a wonderful magazine of humanist and atheist and agnostic writing, which everyone ought to subscribe to, is to contribute a column every other month or so, pointing out the wickedness of religion or advocating for reason in some other way. And it's very nice of you to notice it. Well, there must be a reason, to your third point, why no one ever asks me what our policy of industrial relations with China and Japan ought to be. And maybe it's because I don't get asked that the economy is in such bad shape, but I doubt it.
Another email, Mark Geigal from Beckley, West Virginia. Thank you for your commentaries in The Atlantic. Thank you for protecting Salman Rushdie. Congratulations on being an American citizen. That all said, while Brits are generally welcomed as well-educated, insightful, and smart in America, why do Brits at home often favor the depiction of Americans as little more than dumb, violent, and fat? Is it just in the British nature to be cynical and snarky about everybody?
There certainly is an element of that in the British character, yes, but and there is another thing, which is that the United States overhauled and outstripped the United Kingdom as a world and power and cultural and economic center to what seems to most people quite a long time ago, but is in the British mind very, very fresh, and among many, many people not forgiven. So there's the British compensation for this loss of power is to regard, rather as the Greeks reacted to being overhauled and overtaken and eventually dominated by the Roman Empire, to take the revenge of thinking of their superiors as culturally inferior. That's why the great Polish poet Milosz once referred to irony as the glory of slaves. That kind of sarcasm or bitterness is the revenge of those who've been who've come off second.
Bodcaw, Arkansas.
Thank you. It's so nice to have an opportunity to ask Mr. Hitchens a question. Sir, as a parent, lifelong atheist and a rather successful one, what kind of advice could you give a fellow atheist living in the Bible Belt of the United States on how to survive how to be successful with the subtle bigotries and discrimination that the religious people have toward us atheists. Thank you.
Well, just don't let them push you around. This is America. And also, I would suggest maybe find a way of contacting the very large number of other people there are in Arkansas who think the same way as you do. The beginning of wisdom in this is to realize that it's happened to me a lot of times on my book tour. In Arkansas, in fact, in one case at the book festival there. People come in their hundreds to hear an atheist speaker, and almost all of them have come because they're afraid that if they don't, I'll be the only one there. They just feel they had to sort of show sympathy. They're amazed to find how many other people want to do the same thing. Try that. That'll be interesting. And it'll also put a crease of alarm in the pinched and scrawny faces of the pious.
David Seidman, West Hollywood, California. As an immigrant to the U.S., what do you think about the controversy over immigration to the U.S., the current immigration debate?
Well, not to be too sententious about it, but I did go through a quite long, actually often quite boring and arduous process of doing it legally. And I think I'm probably not the only legal immigrant who doesn't want to see people skip that. So there is that. Making, in a sense, the same point in a different way, no one who has been an immigrant, and after all, it wasn't that difficult for me to do it, likes looking down on other people who want to be immigrants too. The real question is, what are we talking? Are we talking about should there be any more immigration, which some people think there should, some should, or should there be any more illegal immigration? Those are two very radically different questions.
Palm Desert, California. You're on In Depth with Christopher Hitchens.
Good afternoon, Mr. Hitchens. The idea that we were made by a God seems to me harmless enough in and of itself. The problem I see is with all the baggage that commonly rides on the back of that belief. That is adherence to a rigid body of doctrine or dogma, and obedience to an authority that claims God as its provenance. All through history, we've seen how that baggage has been abused in every faith that claims to be the true one. But I wouldn't think that it might be possible to believe in a God and not be led by the nose, and isn't that the argument we ought to be having?
Well, yes, and we touched on it a little earlier in the distinction I made when talking of Thomas Jefferson and Thomas Paine between deism and theism. There are those who say, well, look at the natural world, the order of the universe, etc., etc. You can't picture it without having some originating creator. But suppose you granted that deistic assumption, your work as a theist would be all still to come. You still have to prove this God knows you're here, or cares that you are, or is going to intervene in your life, or would answer your prayers, or even listen to them. That still hasn't even been properly suggested, let alone proved. So that might help to illuminate the distinction. However, if people say that we are literally made, in other words, with a purpose, fashioned by God, I think they commit two errors right away, which I'm sorry I think do lead to all the garbage and baggage that you identify, and to some worse stuff too. Here's why. It's at once, it's too masochistic and it's too solipsistic. In other words, it makes you, as the Quran says, fashioned from a clot of blood, or the Bible says from dust. That's what you are. And but incidentally, with original sin still in. So there you are, effectively a worm, the prisoner of an omnipotent dictator. But as if to compensate for that sort of abject, groveling analysis of your condition, you're told that the whole universe is all about you, and that the God has a plan with you in mind, and that you're in some sense the center of things as well. Now, both of these things are extraordinarily unwholesome.